people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
News. Okay, we'll start with this. You may have heard by now that controversial Olympian Iman Khalif has won Olympic gold in the final bout of these Olympic Games. And I just looked across the landscape at what the reactions were. A lot of people don't seem surprised.
No.
Because a lot of people think Iman is a biological male. Thus, a biological male beating up a bunch of biological females is expected. Given Iman Khalif's height, length, and strength, the fighter seems to overpower their opponents. In my previous video, we talked about the potentiality of this fighter, this controversial athlete, attempting to go pro, and what the obstacles might be. You put the shoe on the other foot. Because of those obstacles and because of the controversial nature of this Olympic run, what if the fighter doesn't go pro? You know, many Olympians, they stay professional amateurs in the amateurs. So what if Iman Khalif and the fighter's handlers decide it would be easier to win another gold medal in the next Olympics than trying to kickstart a pro career?
Is a problem.
Remember that the IBA was stripped of recognition by the IOC, the IBA that oversaw amateur boxing for many, many, many years.
Why were they stripped of recognition?
Reported corruption and match fixing, what has been conflated with the controversy at these Olympic Games that the IBA is a corrupt organization. That's why they were stripped of recognition. What seems to me apples to oranges, because what does that have to do with the biological nature of these two fighters?
What does one have to do with the other?
What? That the IBA can't be trusted? They can't be taken at their word? All right. Then you do a test.
It's too late.
For this fighter, the Olympics are over. They've already won Olympic gold. Just like I told you, they weren't going to perform a cheek swab. They weren't going to rock the boat any more than it's been rocked.
So what now?
Well, like I said, the fighter might decide to stay a professional amateur because it may be too difficult to kickstart a pro career given their ambiguous biology. Though if they were to try to stay a professional amateur, addressing that, you have to wonder if there's even going to be amateur boxing in the next Olympics, because the IBA has been stripped of recognition and another organization hasn't stepped up to take their place. The IOC oversaw the boxing temporarily for these Olympic Games, but now in the build-up, in the subsequent 4 years that will follow, who's going to oversee the amateur boxing? Another organization hasn't stepped up, and if one doesn't, there may not be boxing in the next Olympics.
The IBA getting stripped of recognition is what created this mess. And the difference between how the IBA defines the women's category and how the IOC defines the women's category.
That's how we got here, because the IBA was stripped of recognition. And if a new organization is formed to oversee the boxing in the next 4 years leading up to the Olympics, how will they define the women's category in lieu of these controversial Olympic Games and these two controversial athletes? How will they define the women's category? Based on what?
The IOC is saying there's no scientific method to separate men from women. That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying. So in this hypothetical scenario where a new organization takes the place of the IBA, well then how would they distinguish the guys from the girls, define the category, and who's qualified to be there? Would their definitions be the same as the IBA's? And if they are,
will the IOC recognize them?
Or do the same thing in the next Olympics that they did in these? Just go off their passports and try to make everybody happy.
Seems like they did more to make people mad.
Raise concerns. It's said that Algeria is a predominantly Islamic country, a Muslim country, and in Islam, you don't touch women you're not related to. And so after the fight, and after the outcome was read, a member of Iman's team picked her up on his shoulders, and isn't that the opposite of what the Quran and Islamic culture dictates?
There is just so much going on here that arches so many eyebrows, creates so many questions.
Controversy. I see an effort in some quarters to make this out to be a feel-good story, a human interest story for everybody, but what a lot of people are interested in is the biology of this fighter and whether or not they should have even been allowed to compete against the girls in this category.
That's what's out there. That's what people are saying. Some saying it's disgraceful, disgusting,
Deplorable to celebrate a man punching up girls in the Olympics and reward him an Olympic gold medal. That is how some people are interpreting Iman's Olympic run.
Are they right?
I don't know. I have my own suspicions, my own reservations. The IOC seems complicit with all of this to me. The very ambiguous nature of it all, the vagaries, that you didn't want to get to the bottom of it. You wanted to leave it to everybody's imagination, and you would have had to have done that on purpose.
That the IOC leaving it to everybody's imagination would be better than getting to the bottom of it, because underneath it all, you know what's at the bottom of it.
You know what you're going to find. And if you announce it, you know exactly what people are going to say. Most people, most of them.
You know, that's why you left it to everybody's imagination through the duration of these Olympic Games.
Iman won, but I don't know if we should be celebrating. Doesn't feel like we should. Virtue signaling and inclusivity from the IOC at the alienation of every biological woman in the category doesn't seem like cause for celebration if that's what happened here. The question is that what happened here?
You allow these two fighters that shouldn't have been in this category to compete at the expense of the biological women. Because if you did, that's nothing to celebrate.
Terrence Crawford said that he wanted you next. That was supposed to be the plan. When I asked you earlier, you had this look like that was not ever the plan. Was that true, that you were out, you were not able to fight for a year medically?
They gave us a little, I think 2 months or whatever, because the fight went 12 rounds. The normal suspension in Vegas.
Okay.
And we got that. But, you know, they were giving us a contract that was already made for us. We were supposed to fight him in June.
For Crawford?
For Crawford, you know, after a fight like that, you know, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense
you
to me.
had a broken nose, no?
Yeah, that's what they say, you know.
Oh. Well, I mean, based on that fight, you both were bloody somewhere.
It was a bloody fight, but, you know, I don't think neither of us were damaged like that. They were giving us dates, confirmations for things that we didn't even know. So, you know.
Has Turkey...
I haven't talked to him. I haven't met that guy.
Did you hear what Sebastian Fundora said? Were you paying attention? That his suspension was only a provisional suspension that lasted about 2 months.
Your run-of-the-mill suspension that you get for a 12-round fight in Las Vegas.
So where initially reports indicated that due to the injuries he sustained in the fight, he wouldn't be able to return until the fall, Sebastian himself is saying, no, the suspension only lasted about 2 months.
Go back.
He has the fight with Tim Kazoo at the end of March, and if he was suspended for 2 months, that would have taken up all of April, all of May, and he would have been medically cleared to return to action in June, July, or August.
We're in August now.
Terrence's ring return, after over a year's time, was this month, in August. So based on all of that, it could have been Sebastian that Terrence fought this past Saturday, and not Israel Madrimov. That if what people are complaining about is that Israel didn't even have a lot of fights, just 11 fights as a pro.
Didn't you hear what Sebastian said?
Even though he himself never actually met Turki Al-Sheikh, his team was approached. A proposal was made for him to face Terrence Crawford.
So wait, does that mean that all the stuff about him having to sit out until the fall, all that was bullshit?
True, that you were out, you were not able to fight for a year medically.
They gave us a little, I think 2 months or whatever, because the fight went 12 rounds. The normal suspension in Vegas.
Okay.
And we got that.
You heard what Sebastian told Cynthia Conte.
2 months. That was it. 2 months. And 2 months from March.
That's June. That means that this kid could have been back as soon as June. So why was everyone led to believe that he wouldn't be able to come back until the fall?
Because of what I told you.
And because of what I've been telling you. I told you guys back then, immediately after the fight. All this stuff about Sebastian not being able to come back till the fall, it's mighty convenient. It's almost like you want him to sit out so he doesn't have to fight Terrence Crawford. And what was Samson Lukowicz saying immediately after the fight? That he didn't want Sebastian to fight Crawford. That Crawford would have to wait because what they want to do is fight Errol Spence. Then they went from saying they want to fight Errol Spence to they want to give Tim Tszyu a rematch. But what they didn't want to do was fight Terrence Crawford.
Does Sebastian not realize that he's letting the cat out of the bag?
I think he does. But I also think Sebastian is a kid who was raised right. That if you ask him, he's going to tell you the truth, irrespective of how it makes him look. Like the time I saw him on a podcast and he said, even though he's in the clean boxing program, he's never actually been tested.
He had not been tested up until that point.
And here and now, irrespective of how it makes him look, he's saying that suspension, it wasn't nowhere near as long as it was initially reported. It only lasted 2 months, and they were approached about a Crawford fight.
We were supposed to fight him in June.
For Crawford?
For Crawford, you know, after a fight like that, you know, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense to me.
You had a broken nose, no?
Yeah, that's what they say, you know.
Oh. Well, I mean, based on that fight, you both were bloody somewhere.
It was a bloody fight, but you know, I don't think neither of us were damaged like that. It was a bloody fight, but that's what happens in boxing, you know.
Yeah.
Sounds like Sebastian's nose wasn't even broken. It sounds like all of that was just a lot of bullshit. A lot of bullshit somebody cooked up to keep him out of that Crawford fight.
You know, that's not what Samson Lukowicz wanted to do. That's not the fight that Samson Lukowicz wanted to make.
The fight that Samson wanted to make after the Tim Tszyu fight was the Spence fight.
People saying the fight that makes sense, money is Fundora Spence. But now Spence is no longer, correct? Is that fight completely off?
That is not true. That is not true.
People, who is reporting these things?
You know, you go on social media, you're gonna see a lot of lies.
Okay.
If you want the right things, I'm not gonna tell you guys everything because it's not my job. That's a promoter job.
It's still in the works, possibly.
Of course, it's still in the works. Of course. Spence is Spence. You know, I don't see why he would retire, but you see these rumors online and.
Well, Sebastian, it's not exactly a rumor that Spence might retire. The reason that people think Spence might retire is because of what Spence posted to his own social media. Spence said, this might be the last time that we see him. Then he deleted the tweet.
Though not before a lot of people, including yours truly, screenshotted it. If people were under the impression that Spence was about to retire and he's about to hang him up, it's because Spence said so.
In tandem with outlying factors like the amount of time that will have passed since Errol Spence Jr. last saw action, it's already been over a year. How much longer will it take to put him in the ring with Sebastian Fundora? And if they do put him in the ring with Sebastian, the most awkward fighter at junior middleweight, what are his chances? Are they really gonna do that? When he hasn't fought in over a year, he's coming off a devastating loss, he just parted ways with his career-long trainer.
Surely you can see why people were skeptical.
And still are skeptical, but the main takeaway from all of this is all that stuff about Sebastian not being medically cleared to fight until the fall, all of that was spin. All of that was bullshit. And it looks a lot like the only reason they said that was so that he wouldn't have to fight Terrence.
Well, people should have never been mad at Terrence to begin with. If the story was Sebastian couldn't come back right away, then why were you mad at Terrence?
And if the story now is that all of that was bullshit and they were lying, then why are you mad at Terrence?
You're mad at Terrence that Sebastian was guided away from him.
Old habits die hard. It seems that the PBC is still doing their best to freeze Terrence Crawford out.
They're still doing it.
It's not me connecting dots. It's not me, the content creator, telling you what you should think and what you should make of it. You heard what Sebastian said.
He wasn't suspended until the fall. He was only suspended for 2 months.
That could have been him and Terrence this past Saturday, but his team wanted to go in another direction. I'd call that a duck. Instead of fighting Terrence, you're trying to fight the guy that Terrence beat up.
It's a duck.
Now, elsewhere in the junior middleweight division, tomorrow night, young Virgil Ortiz will return to action for the third time in the last 12 months. Against a significant step up in class, I would argue that so far, Sergey Bohachuk would not only be the best fighter that he's fought so far, but the biggest fighter that he's fought so far. And we will see if young Virgil can stay in character. He made the weight.
How did he look?
Believe it or not, he actually looks better. Better than he did yesterday. He's not as pallid. There's more color in his face.
Well.
Sergey Bohachuk of the Ukraine WBC interim champion most in line to challenge for the full WBC title that Sebastian Fundora currently holds. Can Virgil Ortiz pry it away from him? If he can, Sebastian's going to have a big problem on his hands. He will.
I think Crawford's is mandatory by way of the WBO. It's conceivable he's going to vacate the WBO title to avoid fighting Terrence. If Virgil wins tomorrow, that's another mandatory.
It's another mandatory in the queue for Sebastian Fundora. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. That's what they say.
How the hell is Terrence's mandatory?
For the WBO?
Yeah.
Because Terrence Crawford has been a WBO champion across 3 divisions, and that affords him WBO Super Champion status. But enough about Terrence.
Virgil.
Given the aggressive nature of the both of these fighters, both Sergey Bohachuk and Virgil Ortiz, they're both mid-range to inside punchers, volume punchers, pressure fighters. They both are. You don't often get pressure fighter versus pressure fighter in the sport of boxing, but when you do, it's fireworks.
Wins.
Virgil Ortiz. I'm going with Virgil Ortiz. I'm going with Virgil Ortiz to counter the straight punches Sergey Bohachuk throws from the outside coming in, stepping into the jab to bring over the backhand. I think Virgil can counter him with an uppercut up the middle.
Sergey's best punches are his straight punches when he's stepping into him, whereas Virgil's best punches are his bent arm punches, his hooks, his uppercuts, and I think it's an uppercut up the middle that's gonna do Sergey tomorrow.
How do you know that Virgil packs a big enough punch to stop Sergey?
I don't. But what I do know is that Sergey's been stopped by the light punching Brandon Adams. That's his only defeat as a professional boxer. But Brandon's not known for power. Virgil is.
I think Virgil can counter Sergey Bohachuk as Sergey closes the distance. I think he can counter him out of the high guard with either an uppercut up the middle or a body shot. Pick your poison. Don't forget, Sergey, even though he had his way with Brian Mendoza in his last fight, he beat the hell out of that guy. For a split second, Brian countered him. He countered him with an uppercut, and Sergey was wobbly.
He was hurt.
Now, Sergey is bigger than anybody that Virgil's ever fought. He's big, he's strong, he's aggressive, and he throws punches in bunches, but I don't think Sergey takes the best punch. I don't. I think he's got a shaky chin.
Shaky punch resistance.
And if Virgil gets in with something meaty, something good, I think he can put him out. I think he can put him down. Will he look human? Up until he does. There is a chance.
This is the biggest guy that Virgil will have ever fought. Usually it's Virgil that has the height advantage, the size advantage. Usually he's the bigger guy in the ring and the bigger puncher.
This is the first time he will have fought within the junior middleweight limit, because his last 2 fights were fought just north of junior middleweight.
This is the first time he made it.
There's a first time for everything, but like I said, at the weigh-in, he didn't look gaunt. He didn't look drawn. He didn't look pallid. There was color in his face. He looks all right.
Virgil!
I like Virgil to win. I like Virgil to win by way of knockout in a war. Pressure fighter versus pressure fighter, that's what you're guaranteed. If they both stay in character, and pressure fighters usually do, we're in for a doozy tomorrow, but I've got Virgil. Virgil by way of knockout.
Virgil!